question, many of us are so selfish that life, how can you be saved and not willing to give of yourself? Yeah, first of all, he deals with this. He makes them to understand. He finds a man who's blind, and on the wayside, he makes him spittle and anoint his eyes, and the man comes seeing. And now he keeps on in a dialogue, which brings us to our text. He pulls just outside of Caesarea Philippi and began to say to the disciples, I want to ask you a question. Because if you're going to really understand what you're about, you got to understand the mission. And the first thing he raises the question, he said, who do men say that I am? And when they got through saying that he was Jeremiah and everybody else, you see this part in Matthew's gospel. Then he comes and he say, now that's what everybody else say. But I need you to know, who do you say I am? If you're going to follow who I am, you can't go on somebody else. I need you to know, do you know who I am? Yeah. What's wrong with the church is that, first of all, we got to look at the distinction of our call. If you are a child of God, you got to look at the distinction of the call. In this text, we see that a question of absolute connection is raised. Jesus, in his dialogue with his choice followers, investigates them and says, do you really know who I am? And it would appear that the question posed by Jesus was one designed to lay a foundation of understanding. You can't work for me if you don't know who I am. And there are a whole lot of people who heard about Jesus, but they really don't know who he is. You heard about heaven, but you don't have any view or any understanding. You don't even have any understanding of what it means to be born again. Nicodemus tried it out. He says that, how can I go back a second time in my mother's womb? You remember? And Jesus said, you got to understand, you're talking about flesh. I'm talking about spirit. A whole lot of us in the church are confused when the spirit don't line up with the physical. There are some things that I can't explain to you. Only the Spirit of God can tell you that. Do I have anybody here? Because now notice here, when he raises the question, there are some things, one of the things that have killed and crippled the church is founded in the way that we depend on somebody else to market Jesus for us. And it's amazing, you believe what Miss Fannie Sue said, what Tom Bud said, but yet you don't know Jesus yourself. First of all, the first thing that Jesus made real clear, to know me, that number one, it has to be revealed by your Father. Not by just anybody else. It has to be revealed by the Father. Because after all, you do remember that it was Peter, when he raised the question, said that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. It was Jesus that said, flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. You remember when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist? It was Jesus, it was God himself who said, this is my beloved Son, and who I am well pleased. Well, let me tell you something. In order for you to know yourself as a child of God, it's got to be God who reveals himself to you. It's got to be God who tells you that you are his child. It's not based on anybody else. I didn't get saved off Grandma. Grandma showed me and introduced me to Christ, but I had to know him for myself. You see, that so many of us are hanging on somebody else. I don't care how long you've been in the church, if you hadn't met Jesus personally, if you hadn't seen him by the power of God, he first of all said, can't no man come to me except the Father draw him. There's got to be a connection. I don't care how you look in the pew. I don't care how dressed up you are. If you don't have a relationship with who he is, you really don't know who he is. It has to be revealed by the Father. Who do you say Son of Man is? Thou art the Christ. I feel that the church is so concerned about what we call success that we have crippled ourselves. Because you got to understand, I'll deal with that in a minute. But it has to be revealed by the Father. And it has to be realized through a system called faith. Faith is not seeing stuff that's tangibly seen. It's believing God at his word even when I don't see it. I know that it is. It's taking the underside and taking the bottom and placing it on the top. It's you walking like a king even though you are still in peasant clothes. Did you hear what I said? It's you walking like somebody of worth even though when the world say that you are nobody. When they have deemed you as a reject, you got written all over your life, accepted. Come on here. When they're saying that you can't do this, Spirit of God say, I can't afford not to do it. Faith is that goes in spite of human hands trying to stop you. Yeah, and so you got to recognize when Jesus says this, first of all, in order to be able, you got to come after me, you got to deny who you are. Deny yourself, take up the cross, and follow me. How do you do that? How do you deny you? You got to do it by faith. And there's a system here. Yes, it is only through the grace by faith that we can stand in this system of divine employment. You see, I don't do stuff because I want to. I do some things because I can't help myself. Oh yes, I know sometimes you be done wrong sometimes. You misunderstood sometimes. And there are folk who deliberately go out to kill and assassinate your life. But instead of you throwing a target at them, you go back and embrace them anyhow. Because I heard him say that in this thing you got to do it by faith. As a matter of fact, don't fight your enemy.